I was arranging tulips in the breakfast nook when I noticed the date. 17 years to the day since I married Richard Delaney. 17 years of business dinners and executive retreats. 17 years of his company parties where I played the smiling wife. 17 years of raising 2 kids, moving coasts, supporting his late-night launches, and listening to him tell everyone how he built everything from scratch. I used to correct him once, remind him that I'd been there from the beginning, that I was the one who connected him with his first angel investor, that I, Grace Delaney, was a rising star in finance before I traded my title of CFO for Richard's wife. But after a while, I stopped saying anything. I let the story become his. Little did I know that by sunset, I'd be sitting alone in a boutique hotel suite, looking through company documents Richard never even knew I had access to. I'm getting ahead of myself. My name is Grace Delaney. I'm 42, a mother of 2, and up until recently, the silent partner in my husband's tech empire. Not that anyone would know it by looking at me. In our world, San Mateo, Silicon Valley, it's always the men at the head of the table. The visionaries, the founders, and the women? We're the ones who smooth the chaos, pack the lunches, iron the shirts for Investor Day, smile while we disappear. But I didn't completely disappear. Not really. Before I became the woman planning every gala and birthday party, I was Grace Harper, youngest VP at a fintech startup in Palo Alto. I could model a valuation cap table in my sleep. I loved it. Every chaotic, caffeinated minute of it. Then I met Richard. He was smart, hungry, and relentless. I fell fast, and he knew it. He told me he had a dream of building something big, something powerful. He just needed someone who understood numbers better than he did. I helped him craft his first pitch deck, rewrote his revenue model from scratch, introduced him to a fund manager I interned with in grad school, who gave him $300,000 in seed money. He got the credit. I got a ring. He offered me a symbolic title, co-founder, if I wanted it. But I was already pregnant, already tired. I didn't want a title. I just wanted a partnership. Instead, I got 17 years of smiling through meetings, scheduling pediatrician appointments between board dinners, and being told how lucky I was that he let me stay home. And still, I stayed. For the kids, for the image, for the belief that maybe he'd remember who I was. Then came the pain. It hit me in the produce aisle at Whole Foods, sharp and sudden, like someone driving a nail into my chest. I gripped the cart, dropped the lemons, and struggled to breathe. The ER was crowded. I waited almost 2 hours, alone, before anyone saw me. I called Richard, but he was in Napa. Team building retreat, he said. I called Natalie, our daughter. She sent me a heart emoji and said she was in court. Ethan was, in Berlin. I didn't want to scare him. I drove myself home with a manila folder full of discharge papers and a warning: cardiac arrhythmia. Not a heart attack, but a serious flag. I needed follow-ups, meds, maybe a procedure. I placed the folder on the kitchen counter beside the espresso machine he insisted we install. The same one he never learned to use. It sat there for 3 days. In those 3 days, Richard came home from Napa. Natalie stopped by to borrow our patio chairs for a baby shower. Ethan called to ask for advice about moving money between currencies. Not one of them noticed the hospital logo on the folder, or the 3 bottles of medication beside it. On the 4th day, Mara came by, my best friend since college, the godmother, to our kids, the woman who knew the names of all my college roommates and every single person who'd ever broken my heart. She walked in carrying a green juice and a Hermes tote. "You look pale, hun," she said. "You should really try the ashwagandha supplements I sent you." I didn't tell her about the ER visit, or the arrhythmia. Instead, I asked about her latest retreat in Big Sur. She smiled and said it was divine, then added without hesitation, Richard's been so helpful lately. I don't know what I'd do without him. There it was, just a flicker of something, a shift in her tone, a little too much warmth, a little too much possession. I laughed it off, told myself I was being paranoid. But that night, as I lay in bed beside Richard, who was scrolling through emails, already asleep with his eyes open, I felt the tightness return to my chest. This time, I knew it wasn't just the arrhythmia. Something was breaking. And for the first time in 17 years, I was no longer afraid to look at it head-on. Before we jump in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The next morning, I woke up early, earlier than usual, and walked downstairs barefoot, still in my robe. The house was quiet, save for the faint hum of the fridge and the ticking of the antique wall clock Richard's mother gave us when we bought this house. I stood in the kitchen staring at the folder I'd left on the counter, still untouched. Beside it, a single espresso cup, his, half full. I slid the folder into a drawer. I didn't slam it. I didn't cry. I simply removed it from sight. Mid-morning, I was at our financial advisor's office downtown. Not the one Richard and I used for joint finances. No, I had my own. Quietly established over a decade ago, after I realized Richard had no interest in discussing anything that didn't directly benefit him. Naomi Lynn had been my point person since the beginning, a razor-sharp strategist in her 30s who had once jokingly referred to my portfolio as the tech wife's secret arsenal. Only it wasn't a joke. "It's been a while," Naomi said, welcoming me into her glass-walled office with a concerned smile. "Everything okay?" I sat down, smoothing my skirt. "Do you still have the equity paperwork?" She didn't ask which one. She simply opened a file from her encrypted drive and nodded. "Still holding, 35%, silent class, non-voting, but transferable if certain conditions are triggered." I exhaled. "How much is it worth now?" Naomi leaned back and smiled, almost pitying. "Do you want the market number or the off-the-record one?" "Give me both." She pulled up the dashboard. "Market value puts your share around $38 million. Off the record, what the acquirers are offering under the table, it could go as high as $50, $52 million. It shouldn't have shocked me. I'd helped build the bones of that company. I'd connected Richard with the CTO. I'd advised on the first funding round. But somewhere along the way, I'd convinced myself that none of it mattered because I wasn't on the masthead. Naomi was watching me closely. "You okay?" I nodded. "I just want to make sure everything is still secure, quiet, still tucked under the Harper family trust." "You're fine. But, Grace," she paused. "Is this about Richard?" I didn't answer. Instead, I looked out the window at the skyline. "Let's say hypothetically that I wanted to make changes." She smiled slowly. "Then I'd say you're not the first woman to walk in here with a quiet war on her hands, and you're more prepared than most." By the time I left her office, the fog had lifted. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't overreacting. I was waking up. That afternoon, Mara stopped by again, unannounced. She brought a bottle of orange wine and two of those ridiculous crystal glasses she always swore enhanced the frequency of the experience. I played along. We sipped in the sunroom, watching the neighborhood kids ride bikes down the cul-de-sac. She wore a lemon-yellow silk blouse and a stack of gold rings that caught the light like she'd planned it. "You and Richard should come up to the Sonoma house soon," she said casually. "We're doing renovations on the guest wing, finally putting in a cedar sauna." "We?" I turned toward her. "I didn't realize you and Richard were planning more joint projects." She didn't flinch. "Oh, he's just helping. You know him. Can't resist a good blueprint." I smiled, cold and tight. "And when did this blueprint start?" There was a pause, a flicker of something in her eyes. Then she laughed. Oh, Grace, don't be like that. You know Richard, he's all business. It was the kind of deflection that only works on women who haven't done the math. I had. Later that night, I went into his home office while he was at the gym. The door wasn't locked. He didn't think it needed to be. I opened his filing cabinet, the one he insisted on managing alone. There, among the lease agreements and non-disclosure forms, was a travel folder. 2 tickets to Montana, 1 weekend at an exclusive mountain estate, 1 couple's massage booked under his name, 1 dinner reservation labeled anniversary. The date? Next weekend. Our anniversary. My breath caught. I stood there, holding the evidence in my hands, letting the silence of the room settle around me like dust. I didn't confront him. Not that night. Not the next. Instead, I waited. I smiled. I made his favorite dinner. I asked about his day. I booked an appointment with Camilla Voss. Camilla was a divorce attorney. But not just any divorce attorney. She was the kind you only heard about in whispers at high-end gyms and invite-only charity luncheons. The kind women called when they weren't planning to beg, they were planning to win. She greeted me with a firm handshake and a sharper mind. "Let me guess," she said after we sat down. "You were invisible until you weren't. And now, you're ready to become a ghost he can't outrun." I didn't smile. I want to do this smart. No mess. No noise. Camilla nodded. "Tell me everything." I told her about the trust, about the equity, about the Montana folder. She listened, took notes, then looked up and said, "He has no idea who he married." That night, I returned home just in time to hear Richard laughing in the kitchen with someone on speakerphone. I stepped around the corner. It was Mara. "I can't wait," she was saying. "Just you, me, and the mountains. No distractions." My hands didn't shake. My voice didn't rise. I walked past him, kissed his cheek, and asked if he wanted Thai or sushi for dinner. He looked startled, like I'd interrupted something. Sacred. Thai?" "Great," I said. "I'll call it in." Then I walked out, but not before I glanced at the reflection in the glass pane of the oven. He was already texting her back, and in that moment, I realized something simple and devastating. He'd never feared losing me, not once. But he was about to learn what it felt like to lose everything else, because I wasn't just the woman he betrayed. I was the woman who held the trigger to his empire, and I had just taken the safety off. 2 days before our anniversary, I watched Richard pack his overnight bag. He moved with the ease of a man who believed no one was watching, casually folding his tailored shirts, checking his phone every few minutes, smiling at whatever message flashed across the screen. He didn't even bother to lie. "Conference in Seattle," he said without looking at me. "Might be a late flight." I nodded, playing my part. "Need me to call the car service?" "No, I've got it," he said. "Just stay in, relax. You've seemed tired lately." Tired. That was the word he used. Not invisible, not heartbroken. Just tired. That evening, I sat alone in the kitchen, sipping a glass of Pinot Noir while Thai takeout cooled beside me. Across the island, Richard's laptop pinged with notifications. He'd forgotten to log out. I didn't open anything. I didn't need to. The names of calendar invites were enough. Mara check-in, private tasting, mountain view, spa couples wrap. I closed the lid, wiped the counters, and called Camilla. "It's time," I told her. "I want him served on our anniversary, while he's with her." There was a pause. Then Camilla said, "Consider it done." The next morning, I dressed deliberately. Not in yoga pants or one of the floaty tunics Richard always said he liked. I wore a navy sheath dress and low heels. I did my makeup, pulled my hair back into a sleek knot. When Richard left for his conference, he kissed me on the cheek like nothing had changed, and I let him. At precisely noon, Naomi sent the final, Wire confirmation. The shares were being moved into a newly established trust, one that granted me full control in the event of divorce or company misconduct. By 3, the process server had arrived at the Mountain Estate. Richard Delaney was handed divorce papers and a sealed corporate notice of asset transfer on the deck of a luxury cabin overlooking the pines, with a glass of wine in one hand and Mara in the hot tub behind him. He called me 27 times. I didn't answer. Instead, I took a walk through our quiet neighborhood, the sidewalks dappled with spring light. I passed the Delgado's house, where we once hosted Ethan's 4th birthday party. The lawn still had the faint outline of a bounce house. I remembered the cake I'd baked myself that year, how Richard had claimed credit for the decorations, the theme, the idea, none of which were his. I remembered brushing it off because it didn't matter. The kids were happy, but now I saw it differently. Richard had spent 17 years living in a reality where I was the background music. Pleasant, reliable, always on, but never noticed. And now? Now the music had stopped. That night, I moved into a suite at the Rosewood in Menlo Park. Not because I needed to, but because I could. Camilla met me there the next morning. She brought coffee and a stack of documents that would redefine everything Richard thought he owned. "He's furious," she said, setting the papers down. "His attorney says he had no idea you held those shares." "He didn't," I said, calmly, because he never asked. We spent 2 hours reviewing the strategy. Camilla's plan was surgical, targeted, graceful. We wouldn't destroy him. We'd simply extract what was mine, with interest. "He's already leaking to friends," she warned, trying to control the narrative. "Let him," I said. "He doesn't know the ending." That evening, Mara called me, not from her number, but from the landline at the cabin. I let it ring. Then, on the 5th call, I picked up. "Grace," she said, breathless. "Please don't hang up." I didn't say anything. "I didn't know he was going to do this," she rushed on. "He said he was leaving you. He told me it was over, for years, that you were just staying for appearances." A familiar burn lit in my chest. "And that made it okay?" "No," she whispered. "But Grace, I didn't know about the shares, about the company, about any of it." "Of course, she didn't. That was the point. You saw me, Mara," I said, voice steady. "You were in my house, at my table. You watched me disappear and called it devotion. You helped him forget who I was." She was silent. Then she said the one thing I didn't expect. I was jealous. That stopped me. "Of what?" I asked. "Of your calm, your control, even your silence. I thought if I had him, I'd feel what you seem to feel. But I don't." There it was. The truth, I ended the call with no anger left in me, not because I forgave her, but because she had already lost. She traded friendship for fantasy, and what she got wasn't a life. It was leftovers. Richard tried again the next day, this time through his lawyer. A proposal scribbled together in a panic. The house, a percentage, of the company, monthly support. Camilla laughed when she read it. "He thinks he's being generous." I shook my head. "He thinks I still need him to be." By Friday, we filed for dissolution of marriage and formal asset division. On Saturday, I hosted a brunch, just a few close friends. Naomi, Camilla, woman I met at a local nonprofit who invited me to join a venture fund for female-led startups. We toasted with mimosas, and for the first time in years, I laughed without checking his reaction. I didn't just feel free, I felt real. The kind of real that doesn't need permission to exist. Because finally, I wasn't Richard's wife. I was Grace again, and I was just getting started. The morning of our court date, the fog hung low over the bay, rolling in like smoke across the hills. I stood at the window of my suite, coffee in hand, watching the traffic inch down El Camino. The city pulsed with its usual rhythm, tech giants opening their glass doors, young engineers on e-scooters with earbuds and bad posture, and somewhere, downtown, Richard pacing in a suit someone else had picked out for him. Camilla arrived 15 minutes early, crisp and calm, a stack of files under one arm and that familiar gleam in her eye. "He'll be there," she said as she sat, trying to look composed, maybe even conciliatory. "But his new lawyer, he's no Camilla Voss." I smirked. "Is he trying to settle?" "He wants to. But the offer is still insulting. He doesn't believe you'll walk away with more than he gives." That was the difference between us. He thought he could offer me scraps, and I'd still show gratitude for the crumbs. He didn't know I'd already built a feast without him. We entered the courtroom just after 10. I wore a tailored black dress and a simple pair of pearl earrings my grandmother left me. Richard stood across the room, flanked by his attorney and an assistant with too much perfume and too many post-its. His face betrayed nothing, except the slightest twitch in his jaw when he saw me. The judge, a woman in her 50s with gray-streaked hair and glasses perched low on her nose, began the proceedings with practiced disinterest. But within minutes, her eyes narrowed over the edge of her frames. Camilla moved like a chess master, calmly laying out the timeline of the marriage, the contributions, the quiet empire I'd helped shape, without recognition, without compensation, and without visibility. Then she turned to the trust, the shares, the separate assets I'd built in plain sight, filed correctly, structured legally, and moved strategically. Everything airtight, everything provable. When Richard's lawyer attempted to question my mental clarity, citing my hospital visit and possible cognitive instability, Camilla stood so quickly her chair scraped the floor. "Your Honor," she said, voice cutting and controlled, "my client runs a portfolio larger than your average mid-tier VC. If Mr. Delaney has concerns about her cognitive fitness, perhaps he should have reviewed the tax return she prepared for the last 17 years. There was a rustle of laughter from the back bench. Richard flushed red. The judge leaned forward. "Counselor, I trust you'll refrain from insulting this court's intelligence, or your own client's by extension." By lunch, the courtroom had shifted. The settlement on the table was no longer an offer. It was a plea, and I didn't need it. We left without giving them an answer. Outside, in the cool spring air, Camilla turned to me. "You could take the deal. It's fair, considering." I looked at the document in her hand. The house, the liquid assets, a payout from the company. It was fine, but it wasn't enough. Not because I wanted more money, but because he needed to understand. He didn't lose me. He never had me. He had a version of me that was built to serve his narrative, supportive, soft-spoken, endlessly loyal. But the real me had been quietly awake the entire time, and now she was done waiting. Back at the Rosewood, I returned a call from Maya Chen, a woman I'd met during my months of quiet preparation. She ran a fintech, accelerator for women in transition, widows, divorcees, single mothers, women who had money but not power. "Not yet. I have a spot open," she said. "And I'm not just asking because your story is the most quietly savage thing I've ever seen. I'm asking because your portfolio could fund 12 founders, and your insight could change everything." I didn't hesitate. I'm in. Within 2 months, I was leading strategy meetings, mentoring founders half my age, reviewing pitch decks over espresso, and flying to New York for summits where the only thing anyone asked about my marriage was, "What took you so long?" The divorce was finalized quietly. The press never got wind, and Richard insisted on a non-disclosure agreement that I happily signed, after inserting one clause of my own. He would never again call himself the sole founder of Delaney Ventures. The revised bio on the company's site now read, "Co-founded by Richard and Grace Delaney in 2006. That single line? Worth more than any payout. 6 months after the court hearing, I was standing in a glass-walled office in San Francisco, watching a new founder pitch a climate data startup, when I got a text from Natalie, saw Dad at Ethan's game. He looked old. You look free. I hope you are. I smiled and typed back. I am. Later that week, I flew to London for an investment panel, then took the Eurostar to Paris for a few days alone. Not to escape, not to recover, just because I could. I wandered through the Marais with no schedule, no one asking me what was for dinner or where the keys were or how to fix the printer. I bought myself a necklace at a small boutique. No receipt, no justification. I sipped champagne in the late afternoon and watched the sun move across the Seine. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel the weight of being someone's wife or someone's mother or someone's background. I was Grace Harper again, and I was entirely, unapologetically mine.